$1 million up for grabs in the Saratoga Derby, race number 11 on the 12 race card at Saratoga on Saturday afternoon. Nick Tammaro here, joined by Darin Zoccali, to take a look at this, what's now becoming a 3-year-old turf staple up at the Spa.
Yeah, it certainly has. And they got a great field for this. All of the major players coming out of the Belmont Derby, a couple of others as well. Full field of 11. There's some interesting angles to look at. You have European influence in here as well. When you draft this race, this is pretty much what you want it to look like when the entries are taken. And it's going to be pretty much a barn burner of a race with a lot of questions that are going to be answered on Saturday.
And of course, the international influence of this race, worth mentioning, last year's winner, State of Rest, has now won multiple Group 1 races across the globe, including the Cox Plate in Australia last fall. Pretty incredible to think the runner-up in that race, Soldier Rising, just won a 2 other than on Sunday afternoon. So we'll see how the horses from this year's version of it fare. Let's start by looking at the Belmont Derby and the horses coming out of the Belmont Derby. We have a number of runners coming out of that race, including the top 4 finishers. Classic Causeway scored a massive upset that day. First and foremost, I can't imagine you liked Classic Causeway in that race.
No, I didn't. I didn't like him when the Manuel was in the race, and I really didn't kind of pay enough attention, I guess, to the scratch. But the interesting thing for me there, Nick, was that it's not like he just kind of went out there and went like 52 and 119 in a dawdling pace. It was a contested pace early. He had that pressure early from the one runner. And then when he tried to slow it down, other horses kind of came up to him again on the backstretch, and he had to kind of keep going on the front end. So if he was going to win that race wire to wire, that's not how I envisioned that he would have won it. I thought he ran better than people probably are giving him credit for, but the figures didn't come back all that well. And to be honest with you, the way the race was run and what went on behind him with like 4 or 5 horses lining up, chasing him through the stretch, it was a very odd race for me. And it gets odder every time more odd, I should say, every time I go back and watch it.
So I think one of the things that you can attribute that Classic Causeway performance to is the rail coming down on the inner turf course, which definitely left some fresh grass on the inside. We saw horses do really well down there pretty much all weekend. And I think Classic Causeway was definitely bolstered by it. It's a classic case of, if you miss the wedding, don't go to the funeral, right? You don't want to take roughly a fourth of the price that he was in that race. As far as the also rans go, I thought that Nation's Pride clearly ran best. If you believe, like I do, that saving ground was pretty much essential on that course, he lost a pretty significant amount of ground trying to come from well off of it. Charlie Appleby has kept him over here in the States to prepare for this race, and William Buick is making the trip over to ride. He was aboard for that big win at Newmarket back in late April. William Buick, of course, is Charlie Appleby's main man. I don't think William Buick is coming here for a lobster roll in the backyard at Saratoga.
No, I would definitely agree with that. And I also agree with your assessment that I thought he ran the best of all the horses that finished behind Classic Causeway. And I think when you go back and you watch that race and you try to determine who had the worst trip, who had to overcome anything. I tried to like Side Dog, but he saved every inch of ground. He caught some traffic in the stretch, but really didn't offer much punch coming down to the wire. Nation's Pride, I thought, really kind of got on track late and had to overcome a bit of a tough trip. And the same can be made for Stone Age. I don't think Stone Age got the best ride that day, and he had to come from far out of it as well. So for me, the 2 Europeans coming out of that race are probably the 2 that you want. You're not going to get much of a price on either of them. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Nation's Pride challenges Annapolis for favoritism at post time.
Let's talk a little bit about Annapolis, who's your pick in this race. He is now testing a grade at Stake Waters for the second time as a 3-year-old. He, of course, began his career with a couple of wins, including a smashing debut win right at Saratoga. Now comes in off the Manila run at a mile. He's going from a mile to a mile and 3/16. First of all, is that a concern for you at all?
A little bit of a concern for me, but I don't think that Todd Pletcher would have put him in this spot if he didn't think he could handle it. He could have run him very easily in the Grade 2 Hall of Fame Stakes on Friday and been 1-5, and nobody would have questioned it. The fact that he's putting him here in the Grade 1, I think speaks volumes about what they think about this horse. So I'm going to side with them on that. And I also think that the way the pace is going to shape up, he's going to be in that first flight of stalkers. He's not going to have to do much running early, just kind of track along. And I think that might extend them just a bit.
Yeah, obviously bred to handle a little bit of extra ground. My Miss Sophia was an accomplished runner on both turf and dirt, a graded stake winner at 9 furlongs on the dirt. Annapolis comes out of obviously a lesser race, but I think that was considered a starting point for really where they'd go at Saratoga, whether it would be the Hall of Fame at a mile or this Saratoga Derby at a mile and 3/16. He's now third off the layoff. Another runner who's coming in that didn't contest the Belmont Derby, also from the Todd Pletcher barn, the one that Irad Ortiz has opted not to ride in order to ride Annapolis, is Emmanuel, who you brought up before. I don't see how Emmanuel is going to be good enough to win this race wire to wire with Classic Causeway in there.
No, I agree. The field that he beat in the Pennine Ridge doesn't stack up well against this particular field. I think the biggest thing that he contributes to the race is that he ensures a bit more pace and gives at least Classic Causeway an honest enough runner that could push him along or early on. Now, I do think Classic Causeway is naturally quicker than Emmanuel, but given how he wins his races, it looks to me like Emmanuel has become a need the lead type. I don't know if he can get the lead, but I do think they're going to try. And given that, I think it speeds up the pace, and I think it also limits the chances of Emmanuel.
Yeah, I thought his Pennine Ridge was decidedly underwhelming given the lead that he had and the way he kind of was all out to hold off Napoleonic War and Limited Liability, who quite honestly are not graded stake caliber horses, which we saw it play out that way in the Belmont Derby. Another runner that I thought was a little interesting, he had a pretty favorable trip, all things considered, in the Belmont Derby, was Royal Patronage. He's now in the care of Graham Motion after coming over and making that North American debut for Charlie Johnston. Is this a horse you thought could bounce back at all?
Yeah, I thought his trip, well, on paper, it looks good. If you go back and watch it, he's the horse that pushed Classic Causeway early. Then they tried to tap the brakes on him. Then he kind of had to make a second move to re-engage and get back and mix it up with the pace again. So I think his trip was okay, but I think he was asked to do a lot a couple of times early in the race that may have taken some of the fight out of him. And I thought he ran on well enough. He was even in the stretch, but I thought he ran on well enough to merit consideration here. And if he's going to be a double-digit price, which it appears that he is, moving to the Graham Motion stable, I've certainly seen Graham Motion pull off upsets in spots like this before. He wouldn't shock me in the least.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Maybe now getting a little more acclimated to North American style training, being with Graham Motion, who I think is among the best trainers in the world. This is a horse who did a little bit more dirty work, as you kind of said, than he might be getting credit for based on what we see on paper. All in all, pretty fascinating running of this race.
No, it really is. I think Annapolis is the goods. I think his Penn Mile over that bog, and you cannot emphasize enough what kind of a bog it was that day at Penn National, was an aberration. He showed what he could do next time out, showed his connections that he's worthy of this. I think he's a true talent, and I think he's got a very bright future, and I think it starts on Saturday.
We will definitely see where he stacks up in this 3-year-old turf division in Saturday's Saratoga Derby. Darin, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Nick. Looking forward to it.
And make sure to join us by playing along at twinspires.com. This will be race 11 on the 12 race card, post time of 6:20 Eastern time. Nick Tammaro and Darin Zoccali. Until next time, best of luck.